624. 624. So swiftly $623. 623. Greetings, one and all, in the Master's name. It is a blessing to be gathered here in the house of the Lord again this evening. I was just thinking of our two last songs there we were singing. I think we got our work cut out for us next week if you didn't have any plans. But no, I think moving forward, thinking maybe a duty or how do I orchestrate my life? How do I plan my schedule? Usually it seems like our schedules may be planned for us, but I think it's important that at the end of the day, these things that we sang about here are very important. In in 6:24, we're acknowledging what we've been given. Into our hands is given the light. So let's be careful how we handle that light. And we know the cleaner the mirror is, the truer the reflection will be, and the less maybe questions or smudges. It's a clear reflection of the truth, maybe. And then in the last one there, bringing in the sheaves. I think that's pretty self-explanatory there. Again, all these things, we do have an account to give for the time we've been given and the gifts we've been given. So let's be mindful that we do carry these out. So for a short devotional, let's look at Psalm 37. There's first couple verses there, maybe the first 19, but there's one or two I want to focus in on then. So Psalm 37. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they soon shall be cut down like grass and wither as a green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as noonday. Rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. For evildoers shall be cut off. For those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and delight themselves in the abundance of peace. The wicked plotteth against the just, and gnasheth upon him with his teeth. The Lord shall laugh at him, and his seed, for he seeth the day is coming. The wicked have drawn out the sword, and have bent their bow, cast down the poor and the needy, and slain such as be of upright conversation. Their sword shall enter into their own heart, their bows shall be broken. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholdeth the righteous. The Lord knoweth the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed in the evil time, and in the days of famine they shall be satisfied. So again, we know David had penned in another place about his foot almost slipped when he looked at how well it seemed to go for the wicked and those kind of things. But then he considered their end. And that's reality for each one of us. So let's not get sidetracked with what seems to be going well for those that are doing evil, especially the ones that maybe are taking advantage of the poor and maybe making fun of God and his ways. We can see that going on quite frequently, and maybe ridicule you for standing up for what's right. God even says here in verse, I think it's 11, but he laughs at that. There's a day coming when he understands that the tables will be turned, if you would. So let's keep that in mind. Verse 4 is what I really wanted to think about here, or that drew me to this passage. The second part of this verse, verse 4, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. And we can say, well, Lord, I can argue against that. I haven't necessarily been given the desires of my heart. But we got to go to the first part. It says, delight thyself also in the Lord. So if we were to argue that God did not give me maybe the easier path or the money that I really wanted. So if I'm delighting myself in money, he didn't promise us to give us that. He said, delight in thyself in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires. So if your delight is in money, your delight is no longer in the Lord. So I think we can get that mixed up pretty easy, where we can think, well, God didn't give me this, or God did not grant that wish. Maybe it's even the life of a loved one. Where is our desire? Our desire or our delight has to be in the Lord, and all these things kind of line up, and we have to seek out his will and forsake ours. So we want to be careful we don't get that backward. And verse 11, that's not the one I had meant to reference earlier, but in verse 11 now, but the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. And again, peace is something that is just, maybe the older you get, the more you just feel refreshed by peace. And the idea of peace, the thought of peace, the lack of turmoil and violence and all these other things that want to take our peace. But peace is something that is very attractive, and we are promised that as we give ourselves over to the Lord. We allow our flesh to be broken and seek out his will for our lives, because at the end of the day, that's really what will matter. So as we go forward, facing another week, another month, let's remember that what really matters at the end of the day. And again, that feels like maybe it's just me, that schedules tend to make themselves. Maybe I need to make them before they make themselves. But I find myself too often in reacting rather than being proactive. I had a fellow parts guy that delivers. We were talking about, he had different businesses. He's an older man now. And he asked me, is it running you or are you running it? I think he had asked me different. He was like, are you running it or is this thing running you? So that was a good question for me. And I thought about that as we make our schedules, or are we allowing things around us to pressure us in certain directions? And before we know it, another year has passed and our goals, or what we really passionately wanted to do, was left undone. So anyway, let's stay focused on the Lord, and we know that our redemption draweth nigh. Let's kneel before him in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for another day, another opportunity to gather again this evening. Thank you so much for the brotherhood. Thank you so much for people that you have given us, that we can, as we submit to one another, that we can find love and peace. Thank you for your word. Thank you that you have prospered our plans to meet again this evening. Pray for Brother Lee as he stands before us and shares of your work, continue on in other parts of the world. Just pray that you would be with him, be with his family as well. And Lord, help us all to be mindful of the time that you have given us, that we wouldn't become sidetracked, and the attractions of Satan would not be appetizing for us, but that we would seek you, and knowing that as we turn our hearts toward you, you will fill our hearts with what you have promised us, Lord, and that we can live in peace and in victory. Thank you so much for the hope that we can have in you. Be with us now as we continue on. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So we're happy to have Brother Lee Lehman here from Strasburg congregation and some of his family. So he's going to share about the work at MAM. So let's give him our attention at this time.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. We greet you in Jesus' name this evening. Glad to be here among you. And this evening, and Brother George asked me to share about the work of Mennonite Air Missions in Guatemala, so I will endeavor to do that. As I think about the work in Guatemala, there's been a number of people from this congregation that have been instrumental in years gone by. And both of them that I'm thinking of in particular have gone on to meet their reward. One was Paul J. Martin. It's probably the first one I remember talking about Mennonite Air Missions amongst our churches. And the other one was Brother Harold Martin. Both of those were very instrumental in the work in Guatemala. And probably for myself, the first time I was there was 1977, shortly after the earthquake of 76. And then it was a number of years after that the ministerial body chose to put me on the Mennonite Air Mission Board, and I've been down every year except for 2 since that. The motto for Mennonite Air Missions is found in Psalm 126 and verse 5. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. I'm going to read that whole psalm. And I think this was the desire of Harold Kaufman, who was a founder of Mennonite Air Missions. Beginning with verse 1. When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Then was our mouth filled with laughter, and our tongue with singing. Then said they among the heathen, the Lord hath done great things for them. The Lord hath done great things for us, whereof we are glad. Turn again our captivity, O Lord, as the streams in the south. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth and weepeth, and bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. That was Brother Harold Kaufman's vision as he went to Guatemala prior to 1972, but he had this burning desire to reach people other than that was in the city of Guatemala. And that's where it gets its name, Mennonite Air Missions, as he chose to reach other areas with an airplane. Otherwise, the only way to get there was to walk in. Just a little bit of history. Brother Harold wanted to start a mission, and he wanted it to be what he called faith-based. He was just going to go out on his own and pray that the Lord would send support. But his brother Andrew said, Harold, that's a wonderful vision. But he says there's a little problem with the practicality of it. He says you really need a board to back you up, to be accountable to, so that it just doesn't roll on. And so, to my knowledge, there were 3 original board members. One was Glenn Martin from our southern churches, Bishop Glenn Martin, Andy Kaufman, Harold's brother, and Uri Sharp. Of those 3, Uri Sharp is the only one that's still living, but he hardly attends any meetings. His mental ability is deteriorating. And so there's a group of men now that were not part of it from the very beginning. And it's a little bit like our schools. The present board, very few had the struggles of starting a Christian day school. And so the group that's on the board now, we're not part of those that had the early struggles of Mennonite Air Missions. I brought a map of Guatemala here, and Guatemala is a little smaller than the state of Pennsylvania as far as land size goes. And the population of Guatemala is 17 million. The population of Pennsylvania is about 13 million. But Guatemala is a very hilly country from the west to the east. And the economy there is a little different than what we're used to, but it's a lot better than what it was years ago. Today, Guatemala is the largest economy in Central America. And you know, I don't know my geography all that well. It's probably only about 10 or 15 years ago that I discovered, I know it's been longer than that, it's about 1992, 5 in there, I discovered that Mexico was part of North America. I always thought it was part of Central. So Guatemala borders Mexico, the yellow to the left and to the top. And right here to the right is Belize. The country of Belize comes down right into here. And then over here on the right side, we have Honduras. From here that way is Honduras. And to the left is El Salvador, there to the south of Guatemala. Guatemala City is right there. About 5,000 feet above sea level is Guatemala City. And coming back to just a few logistics of Guatemala, the average person in Guatemala makes about $4,603 annually. That's US dollars. Pennsylvania, the average is $41,000. Go figure. And, you know, the things that are bought, consumer items, are not that less expensive in Guatemala. They just simply do without. Groceries are fairly expensive unless you grow your own. That is where they are. The Guatemala in a year's time turns out about $23 billion. Pennsylvania, 2023 turned out $975 billion. So that's a little bit of the economics that's involved there in Guatemala. Just want to tell you a little bit about the churches. There's 17 churches under Mennonite Air Missions. The largest number they had was 19. Mennonite Air Missions tried to plant a church in Honduras. That one really never stuck. It didn't work. It started, and so the missionaries returned back to Guatemala, and those Jews didn't there. Another one is way up here, and that's known as El Chao. There was a school and a church there, as well as a clinic. The clinic and the school is now under Jungle Breezes. Keith Waddle had some involvement with Jungle Breezes. He can tell you more about that than what I can. The congregation up here at El Chao is an independent congregation. It's outside of Mennonite Air Missions. It's outside of Jungle Breezes. It's a congregation that is standing on its own 2 feet. One of the visions of Harold Kaufman was to plant churches, to evangelize, plant churches that are what are known as indigenous churches. As what that simply means is that they were self-sustaining, self-supporting by the people of Guatemala. A little bit like the Apostle Paul when he went out. He went out and he started a congregation and he ordained elders, and then he moved on. And Mennonite Air Missions, while that is our goal, I don't think that we've succeeded as well as what we would have liked to, because we still need a lot of personnel to help organize and to teach and to train people to be Christians. You know, we have grown up in a society where it wonders me how many generations is behind me that were Christians and were Mennonites as Christians. These people weren't even Christians. They had a mix of their culture, their native culture, mixed in with Catholicism, and they were a very superstitious people. But Harold Kaufman, while he started a church here in Guatemala City, and when he started Mennonite Air Missions, there where we know what is headquarters, would have almost been like looking out across some of these fields here today. But if you go there now, there are factories built all around it. There is no grass there. It is in the middle of the city. Well, Harold Kaufman, he had this idea that he wanted to reach people that were never reached with the gospel. And you can read that story in this book, Under His Wings. It's a history of Mennonite Air Missions, I think up through, I'm not sure how many years it was. I'm not even going to guess. But one of the first missions that he started outside of Guatemala was up here at San Andres. San Andres is way up here. Okay, down here's Guatemala City, up here, and the next one was San Bartolome and Mishkola Hall. Now those are probably names you can read in Mennonite Air Missions newsletter. And why did Harold want to use an airplane? Well, from Guatemala City, right here, up here to San Bartolome is about a 6-hour drive. It's a 5-hour drive today. But in Harold's time, there was no way you could drive up here. You could drive up part way, and then the last several miles you would have had to walk up and down to get there. And the flight with an airplane from there to there is about 30 minutes. Drive, 6 hours. And then you have Mishkola Hall right here. That's about, I'm going to say, another hour and a half drive by road. And the San Andres likewise. But as what Harold would do with his airplane, here is where the benefit of it was. He could have a service in Guatemala City in the morning. He'd have a preaching service. And then he would fly up here to San Bartolome. And he would have a service there in the afternoon. And then about a 10-minute hop over to San Andres instead of a 2-hour drive and have a third service. Now I'm going to tell you what, preach 3 sermons in one day, fellas. And he was too tired to fly back down to Guatemala City that night yet, because he did not want to fly that route at night. It's very, 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 very rugged. But that was his vision and his goal, and that's how Harold Kaufman got around to so many places with the airplane. Today, Mennonite Air Guatemala has improved its roads very much, and today you can drive to all of these with a vehicle, 6 hours, 8 hours, you can be there. And with personnel there at the churches that can go ahead and lead out, the airplane became less and less needful. It became more of a convenience thing. And so Mennonite Air Missions several years ago have sold that airplane. So Mennonite Air Missions no longer has an airplane. They sold it to Jungle Breezes. You still have that same plane, Keith?
I think so, but I'm not real sure. I think we do. They use it for like ambulance, medical emergencies.
Mostly emergency things, yeah. Okay, thank you. So as far as I know, it is, but it's up in here somewhere. Is where it is stationed. So that's how they got around. Just to point out a couple of churches that Mennonite Air Missions has. Okay, there's one here in the city. And let me see, I think my pin fell out. There was one right in here where Victor Avalla's church is, San Cristobal. And by the way, for you older folks, Victor Avalla sends his greetings. He's 71 years old. His wife is 84 years old, Anita. So he's getting up there in years. So we need, we need people to replace people like Victor. But there was a church here, and then we come on out here. Now there's Victor's church. The city, Guatemala Victor's church. Come way out here is a church by the name of Zaragoza, and just above it is Navala. And there used to be another congregation there in Navieta, but they're close together. There's only one member at Navieta anymore, so that goes to Navala for church. And then way out here is Novello, I'm sorry. Way out here is Novello, and down here is Novieta. Now this is Zaragoza, and that one's Hoya Grande. Now that, those names mean about nothing to you. But then we get down to the southern part. We have La Cipressa. No, that's Los Ochotes. Up here is La Cipressa. Down here is Pasaco, the Porvenir. And up here is Pitao. And then just above it is a little church known as La Pastoria. It's like a pasture up there. And then beside it, the pin fell out, is Ortorio. And Ortorio is a town that has become a little bit more active, a mission post to become more active, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. We go a little bit east of Guatemala City. We have a little congregation there called San Sur. And then we have an outpost way up here. It's called Santa Rosita. Now, to drive to Santa Rosita, though, you start here at Guatemala City, and you follow the highway out, and you got to go up around this lake here. It's too rough in through here. And then follow the road up here to El Chao. And that takes about a good 8 hours to drive up there, and then it's about 2.5 from there on over. So it's a good 10, 12-hour drive from Santa Rosita back down to the city. Each one of those congregations are small except for San Bartolome. I think there's 30 couple members there. It's one of the larger congregations that is there. But they were picked up out of the dirt. So Brother Harold had lots of experiences with the natives, with the superstitious people, and he had a lot of experience where it seemed like the angels carried the work forth and gave protection there. One of the things that they warn us about is pickpocketing, and that's a problem. Never experienced it, so I can't tell you anything about that. But, as I visit the people are very, very friendly people. And while they're very friendly, there's a certain suspicion they have of other strangers that come in. And it takes a while to build that trust. One of the problems with mission work is we ask people to go for 2.5 years. How long does it take you to trust an individual? One of the complaints that I do hear from the natives is this, that the Americans come down here for about 2 years and they live within the culture, but then here's what they do. Back to the States where it's rich. That's their perception, see. So how do we get people to be involved long term? Well, it takes somebody that has that heart that I read about there in Psalm. Somebody that has it in his heart. He goes forth and weepeth and bearing precious seed. He is able to see beyond the here and now. He sees it takes a lot of teaching and it takes a lot of preaching before people are going to get a hold of it. But there's a number of individuals in Guatemala that have become very, very strong Christians. The temptations are the same in Guatemala as they are in the United States. Human nature is the same. There's outward circumstances change, but the enticements and desires and lusts of the heart is the same. It doesn't matter where you go. That is where they are. Mennonite Air Missions has a goal of helping the people to better themselves in the way that they live. Now, when I say better themselves in the way they live, it's not a matter of having bigger houses and more farms and that sort of thing, but is what it is so that they can learn to have enough without stealing. And as a general rule, while those numbers are very low, that their income is very low, if they learn to trust a God instead of trusting in a vice to get rid of their troubles. Some people use nicotine, some people use alcohol, some people use lust of the flesh to overcome their worries. But when a person becomes a Christian and we turn those things over to God, we get a new goal. Now, George read there, let me see, something about having the desires of thine heart. Well, is what we need to do. If we get into the Word and allow God to change the desires of our heart, they'll be met. But when the desires of our heart is earthly, they're not satisfied because it always wants more. It wants a little bit more and a little bit more. And, as I think about my friends in Guatemala, there's one problem with making a lot of friends. And that is this: you leave a little bit of your heart wherever, all over. That's not all bad, that's good, but that's what happens. One of the things that has resulted from my involvement in Mennonite Air Missions is back in 2003, I took my family along down to visit to see what Mennonite Air Missions in Guatemala was all about. A year later, my daughter went down, 2004, and she's been down there 20 years now. And she has enjoyed it very much down there, but here's what she says. She says, I hate to come and go because when I leave down there, it tears at my heart, and I'm coming home to friends. But then whenever I go back to my friends in Guatemala, it tears at my heart again. But that's just part of life. That as humans we need to deal with. But she has thoroughly enjoyed working among the native people. She has enjoyed watching several of them become Christians. And she has watched a number of her students enjoy coming over to her house. She's forever sending pictures home of all these children piled out on her porch and playing games, and she makes donuts with them and that sort of thing. It would, I don't know if I could handle all of that. But she enjoys it, and I'm glad she does. She has a whole group of supporters there. She is no longer under mission support. She has actually started her own school teaching English to the natives. And she starts about dinner time, 12 o'clock, our first class. And I think she has 3 or 4 classes, and I think the last one's over about 8:30, something like that. So her classes, are in the afternoon. And the ages of her children are from this young man up here. Let me look back over here. Well, I am not going to guess ages here. Her oldest one was about 65, okay? But she's teaching a number of them so that when they come to the United States, they can communicate. In fact, some of her students are employees in the United States, and their employer up here sent them back to her to learn English. And so she has basically become self-supporting there where she lives. As I think about the Guatemalan culture and what they're like, we have been blessed with a lot of stability in our homes. And I don't know if we're thankful enough for stable homes where there's a mother and a father. One day there was a little boy who was gone. I don't know if he was gone for weeks or months, but showed back up, and Judy was talking to him, but he stood there with his hands behind his back. Anyhow, they had their little chat. Anyhow, Judy says, we'll call him Fred. Says, Fred, I want to see your hands. So Fred held out his hands, and they were covered with glue, airplane glue, that kind of glue. Okay, he was sniffing glue. And as what that kind of glue vapors does is makes your mind go funny, makes you feel good for a little while. And now she says, Fred, so why do you have glue in your hands? His answer was, because I have nobody. I don't have a father, I don't have a mother. I don't have a grandpa. He was a street boy. Nobody would take him in. And so he turned to glue to cope with life. In our society, people turn to cigarettes and alcohol and drugs. And is what we really need to do is we need to turn to God. Leave him fill that hole that's in our soul that can only be filled with God. Nothing else. Nothing else can fill that. Another day, one of the house parents asked us to, if we wanted to go along with them. I should back up and tell you the story. We came home from church, and there was a boy and a girl out on the porch. And they were out there. We sat down, we had lunch. Then the house parents took a plate of food out to the boy and the girl. I'm guessing 8, 10 years old. I don't know. But anyhow, then after dishes was done, he says, you want to go along, take them home? It was rainy. Instead of sending them home, he offered to take them in the vehicles. Sure, we'll go along. I don't know why we do these things. Can't understand the language, but go along anyway. It's interesting. So we get there and we stand at the edge of their property. Most of them have a fence around their property, and you don't go in. You stand at the fence, at the gate, and you call out hello in Spanish, and they'll greet you back. And when they tell you to come in, then you go in. So we went, and we sat on the porch. There was about a 10 by 20 porch there with a little wall around. We sat on there. And there was a little child come out and was running around in a walker, okay? Wasn't walking yet, had a walker. And asked the mother what the baby's name was. I don't know. Now, to our culture, we're, what? You're the mother and you don't know the name of this child? And ask how old the child was. No. Well, Guatemalan culture is that they don't name the baby for 30 days. And so dad calls the child one thing, mother calls the child another thing, and brother calls the child something else. They all have all these different names, and after about a month they decide this is the name. And then they register the child, get a birth certificate, and whatever day they register, that's how old the child is. So if the child is 6 months old, before they register, they were born on their 6-month-old date. Or it might even be a year, who knows? Anyhow, the mother finally told us that this child was, I don't know, I think 6 months, something like that. My wife says, no way. No 6 months is going to run around in a walker like so. And anyhow, leave that be as it may, she did send one of the children in to bring the birth certificate out. And so as looking down over it, there's enough of those words I do understand what name is and all of that. So we figured out what the age was and what the child's name was. Then I asked the house dad, says, so what does a dad here do for a living? He says, you don't even want to know. And he was in the house, he was sweeping it out. And then he leaned over and he says, he's a professional thief. That's what he did for a living. He was a thief. And anyhow, I asked my daughter some years later, I'm going to say 5, 6 years later, I says, whatever happened to that family when we went along with the house parents over and took those children home? Well, she says, the dad got shot. He went to steal at the wrong place that day. He didn't return. Not sure where the mother is, but the one child is in Guatemala City and the other one is somewhere else. But it's just chaos like that. But when a person becomes a Christian, I'd like to tell you that with the churches and Mennonite Air Missions, when a person becomes a Christian, that begins to come back together. When they learn what it is for husbands and wives to love one another, when they learn for parents to love their children and to be responsible for them, where they're given some direction in life of what a home is supposed to be like. That's a little bit what's happening there. I'm not sure how many members there are right offhand in Guatemala, Mennonite Air Missions, and there's a lot of other missions that are there as well. The fellowship churches, they have a mission in the area. Eastern has a mission out here in the western part of Mennonite of Guatemala. So there's many evangelical missions there as well. Guatemala is open to mission work. There's a number of countries that are closed to mission work, but at this point, Guatemala is very open to people coming down in the name of missions. Over the years, there's a lot of things that have happened, and in the churches of Guatemala, but one of the difficult things is to be law-abiding in the ways that we do school and church. In Guatemala, you cannot have a congregation unless you have 25 members. You cannot have a congregation less than that. And so how does Mennonite Air Missions operate with so many churches that have, what I was telling you about under novel law? There's 3. Down in here, some of them only 10. Well, because Mennonite Air Missions operates as a conference, they can put all those congregations together. That's how they operate within the law. Comes to schooling, to operate your own school in Guatemala is a whole lot different than what it is here in the United States. We have been blessed by the government authorities in allowing us to operate the schools the way that we do. Society is structured a lot different. That is true. One of the things that works here in the United States is there's enough of jobs that you don't need a certificate much at all to get yourself a job where you can support your family. You can create enough of income to support your family. In Guatemala, while the economy is getting a lot better, as far as what's known as middle class is not as big as what it is here in the United States as we're used to. You have the poor, the very, very poor, and you have the rich and the very, very rich. If you think land is expensive here, try to buy an acre of land in Guatemala. Even out in the country, even out in the country, you're probably going to be looking at closer to $100,000 US. I tried to pay for an acre of land, $100,000 on a $4,000 a year income. To give that income a little perspective, and my figures are 10 years old, they're not up to date. But 10 years ago, the average Guatemalan worked from January 1 to October to buy groceries. No, they didn't have electricity. To buy groceries. Do you know what the average American, how long they work to buy groceries? If you took all your paycheck from January 1 to about the middle of February. My guess with inflation, I think we better include all of February. But 2 months' wages, you'll probably buy all your groceries for all year. You got 10 months' income to pay for the rest, to pay for your property, your electricity, your automobiles, etc. Try to do all of that on 2 months' income. That is a disparity between the economies. But you know, I've discovered that they're just as happy as we are, if not happier, in fact. They got less junk to get rid of at the end of the day than what I do anyway. That, that sort of thing. Mennonite Air Missions today, down here in Auditorio, right down here. Mennonite Air Missions has built a school, and the purpose of that school is to train teachers. In Guatemala, if you do not have a school certificate that is signed by a certified teacher, you cannot continue on to further education, okay, what we would call college. Pretty much here in the United States, if you can pass an entrance exam, you can go to school, you can go to college. In Guatemala, you can pass that, but you need a piece of paper to go along with it. And the Guatemalans are probably a little bit more, well, not a little bit more, they're a lot more concerned about their children having a proper education certificate. Concerned so much that they will take their children out of Christian day school, out of the church school, and put them into the public school setting so that they can go farther into nursing, into engineering, that sort of thing. There is a number of Mennonite Air Mission people that have their certificates. And while they have their certificates and are doing well, unfortunately, there's a lot that have went and got their certificates and have lost out by the way. A little bit like here in the United States, for some reason, a lot of our people that go on to higher education don't come back. We'll leave that go for another discussion as to what might be behind all of that. And so, because what Mennonite Air Missions is trying to do is we wanted to build a school where students could go to school, but also teachers, wannabe teachers, could come and be instructed on being a teacher. And some of our teachers are certified that if these student teachers are under their teaching, that they can be certified. And our goal is to get a certified teacher in each one of the church schools. The problem that comes with that is after a person becomes certified, they can go to the public school system and get paid a whole sight more than they can in the church system. Money talks. We need to have, here in the United States, we also need to have a desire. We need to have a purpose. We need to understand the importance of Christian education. And we need to understand the dangers of what's out there in the public system with all the woke and anti-God that's out there. that we are willing to sacrifice to have godly schools. And it's through these people then that become missionaries and are able to teach others. Back in the day when Harold Kaufman started Mennonite Air Missions, there were a lot of people illiterate. One of the bishops in Guatemala, native bishops, he's approaching 60 years old today. His health is failing him. But he grew up in a time where he was taught, but his wife was not. His wife cannot read, nor can she write. Now, men, let me ask you a question. How much do you depend on your wife to write checks, to make communications, phone calls, appointments? That mother cannot sit down and read stories to her children. You know, I'm just pointing out some of the downsides of not being able to read and write. And we hate school so bad. And we don't realize the freedom that it actually does give us to be able to add and subtract, to be able to multiply and divide. Yes, it is true that here in the United States, our society, our jobs are a lot more complicated than a lot of them are in Guatemala. But that's because they still have a very strong agricultural base. Back in 1960, 1970, 1980s, maybe even the 90s yet, here in the United States, you could take most anybody off of a farm and they could soon pick up on a job. There's a lot of jobs today is a lot more complicated than just hopping on a tractor and going and plowing. It's a lot more complicated than picking up a saw and building a house. There's a lot of jobs that are more complicated than that, and so that's the reason that it's good that we have some subjects that help us to learn to be problem solvers. That in an agricultural society you really don't need. But when it comes to the spiritual side, I'm talking about the physical side there. When it comes to the spiritual side, we need to be able to read God's Word and to understand what it has to say about getting along, what it has to say about following God in His ways, learning to trust, to come out from among them, and to be separate. Back in the 60s and 70s, when a number of our conferences, church groups were coming out of the big conferences, and they said, "You'll never make it. You'll never make it." But Southeastern did. Cumberland Valley has. Midwest has been able to make it work. But I think it comes through knowing what God has to say. When it comes to missions, and learning to know those people and learning their culture, they begin to teach us instead of us teaching them. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from them, and probably trust is one of them, especially out amongst other people. One time, on one of my trips down, I got to the airport, and at the airport you go through customs and all that, and then there is an area, it's kind of gated off, that the general public are not allowed to come into. You go through there, and then you go out into the rest of the world. And as a general rule, we wait in there until we see whoever's coming to pick us up. And that particular time, I had a cell phone, but it did not work anywhere but the United States. And anyway, I got there, and I was looking around, and a fella come up, and he says, you need a ride? I said, no, I said, somebody's coming to pick me up. Well, he informed me he was from El Salvador. He got stopped at the border of Mexico and they turned him around. And he wanted $10 for a bus ticket back to El Salvador. He told me he didn't have anything. Well, I ignored him. I wasn't ready to give him $10. But he stuck around there. He said, somebody coming to get you. I says, yeah. I says, oh, they'll be here. Well, the truth is, they forgot that I was coming, and nobody was coming to pick me up. And I said, well, I don't know. I says, I guess I can call, but I don't have a phone to call anybody. And so I opened my briefcase up, and right on top there, my wife had a few snacks for me. But I was looking for my card that I have all my phone numbers and stuff on, and a picture of my family there as well. And so I got the phone number, and he says, I'll get it. And he went off through the crowd, and after I come back, he got a phone from somebody. And I showed him the phone number, so he calls. He says it's ringing, so I called and talked to him, and they say, they forgot. So they'll be there. I says, okay. Anyhow, he told me, he says, I haven't had anything to eat for a whole day now. He says, I'm a little hungry. So I'll give him one of my little packs of crackers, and he was happy. And I showed him a picture of my family and was telling him about Mennonite Air Missions. He had broken English, but went on for a while. And we waited there. He says, he says, I'm still hungry. I said, okay, buddy. I give him another pack of crackers. And he told me again he needed to get back to El Salvador. And I thought, well, whatever. So I give him $10 US. He had to go somewhere and get that changed. But he stuck around there. He stayed with me. And after a while, he saw Mark Gingrich's wife, Norma, in the crowd. He pointed back, he says, right there. I said, yeah, that's the one. And and then he disappeared. Didn't see anything out of him after that, but I often had to wonder. But I gave God the credit for sending that man. I had no way to talk to anybody there, but here this fellow that spoke English came up. He had a few needs. He had a few needs that I could meet, but I had a need that was a whole sight bigger than the need that he had, I thought. And he was able to communicate for me. And I've often wondered if he was an angel. I don't know. He was a person as I saw him. He had the needs of a person, but it doesn't matter to me. I feel God sent him there that day. There's many opportunities for you and I there. There are opportunities, there's building projects that is happening. The church down at Oratorio is too small, and so costs too much to buy land. So what we plan on doing is taking the roof off and the end wall and side wall, make it wider and longer. We'll need a few people for that job, and they like to do that from November to April. That is the dry season in Guatemala. They have a dry season and a wet season. They don't have winter and summer. And when it's rainy season, it rains. It's not a good day to try to build things. That's happening down there. Also, we're doing the same thing with the clinic in Oratorio. We want to use the clinic to teach some of the church individuals to be nurses. The idea is to give them a job, give them a way to make an income for themselves, so that they don't go back to their old ways of getting an income. As far as the Mennonite Air Missions, the personnel that we need, we can use house parents. House parents' job is basically at headquarters Yeah, it's to be mom and dad to who knows who from day to day, whoever comes in. Just to organize the work there, to keep it clean, keep it ready for visitors, for meetings, to take care of the vehicles that need scheduled. We need individuals that can be church leaders. We're looking for couples that can go down and organize church services. Basically, be responsible, just like a Sunday school superintendent, to make sure that people are lined up to teach classes, to make sure that somebody is there to preach, and it might be you. Those kind of things. Just like being parents to people that aren't your own children. As far as house parents goes. We also have a need of VSers, boys and girls. Right now, we're looking for somebody at headquarters to do mechanical work and to do taxi work. When I call taxi work, it's making runs to the airport. Runs to the airport take anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, depending on traffic. Also bus runs. And, one day, I was supposed to take a VW way up here from the city, up here to El Chao. Now, I know my way up there, but I told them, I says, no way am I running this thing through the city. And so one of the VS boys that I'm talking about, his job, he hopped in there and he drove me out of the city. He dropped me off and I knew the way up. I drove from there up. And he hopped on a bus and went back. I don't know, I think it'd be about half interesting to be about 20 years old again and go down and do that kind of thing. That VS girls, involved in girls clubs, involved in helping the house parents there at headquarters, involved in teaching Sunday school, involved in helping at the clinic. Those sort of things is what we're looking for there. So anybody that's looking for a change of pace, let me know. I'll be glad to help you out. And most people don't care to volunteer for these kind of things. So if you know somebody that would maybe fill the spot, don't be afraid to tell me. I'll go tap them on the shoulder and give them the opportunity to say no or yes, those sort of things. But that's the work of Mennonite Air Missions, is to take the gospel to those that have never heard the gospel, to take the gospel to those that have heard of the gospel, but have a warped view of what Christianity is. That's the work that is going on there in Guatemala, and there's a lot of work that needs done all over the world, not just in Guatemala. People that do not know who the Lord is, do not know what salvation is about. Now, I've talked about all of that there. There's one group that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the people that is supporting the work. Everybody can't go. There needs to be those that are behind supporting the work. And those are the individuals you never hear about. You don't hear about those. Mennonite Air Missions operates on a budget of about $45,000 to $50,000 a month. That comes from somewhere. We don't hear about those people, do we? You never hear about those. But there are people just like you that are out there supporting Mennonite Air Missions. Clinton's father-in-law, Amos Hurst, happens to be the treasurer. And it sure is nice for a treasurer when funds are available. And it's running pretty good right now, but the treasurer tells us that it has slowed down a good bit. And so there's always needs there. If you need an address to send it to, see Clinton. He knows his father-in-law's address. You can always use that there. I did bring along what we call Mennonite Air Missions Handbook. A few back there is what these are about. Is what we expect out of staff. These are the expectations of being on the staff for Mennonite Air Missions. And there's this one. This is for North American staff. This is not a Guatemalan church standard. There's a different Guatemalan church standard. Okay, they have a Guatemalan church. Mennonite Air Missions in Guatemala has a discipline book the same as we do, but life isn't quite as complicated, so it's a lot smaller. But it's very much to the point. But you can help yourselves to them back here. You can see what that is about. Brother Allen asked if I was going to give opportunity for questions. I told him, yes, I'll give opportunity for questions. Probably most of them I won't know how to answer, but hey, you can ask them anyway. So I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions that I didn't even touch on.
Could you talk a little bit where Trent, his location is and what his name might be? Or Tristan Martin.
Okay, yeah. Yes, Tristan Martin. I didn't mention him from here. No, Miss Lydia, she's not Miss Lydia anymore, but Lydia Martin Pratt was down there for about 3.5 years from this congregation. But yeah, Tristan from Mount Olive, he's down in Oratorio, and his responsibilities is to help the Bishop Isaias out there. He's also helping with a lot of the maintenance work that's being done there, and he's involved in the church work, Sunday school, singing. He's involved in the clinic organization, managing it. He's got some of those responsibilities. He doesn't have a lot of time to stand around. At least that's what he told me anyway. Yeah, and we're glad for his work there. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned about $4,000 that they make a year. Do they have income tax you have to pay out of that?
Most of them don't make enough of money to pay income tax. They would love to make enough money to pay income tax. We grouse, and they wish they could. That's the difference in the economy. Yeah. No, most of them do not have an income tax on that amount. That 4,000 would equate out to a middle income, a middle class income. Sort of. I should mention that some of my friends that were down there, they lived in houses that were built out of corn stalks. They had a framework of about 2 to 3 inch poles, corners and side rails, tied corn stalks to those and smeared them with mud. That's where they lived. And and I have friends that live in those kind of houses. Well, it has a little bit of a mark on what for house I live in, okay? Those sort of things. And people that have a lot nicer house than I do, I want you to know I'm not condemning them. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying I have friends that live on that level that I find it difficult way above there. But the economy has increased enough that none of my friends that I know of today live in a cornstalk house anymore. They have tin siding on there. Anything else? Thank you for listening.
$365. $365.
I want to thank you very much, Brother Lee, for sharing that information. If anyone the Lord has tugged on your heart, yeah, I'm sure they would love to have you. And I did notice, I think it was, is it today or yesterday, your name was on the church calendar, maybe for an anniversary, or maybe I should ask your wife. Today, 45 years, right? Did I do it right? So, yeah, short years, 45 years of marriage for. So I didn't realize that when I asked him to come here, that I would be asking him to come speak at a church on his anniversary, 45th anniversary. But I think Christ told Mary that she chose the better thing. So I think there's probably not too much more fulfilling that you could have done than to come and do the Lord's work on your anniversary. So God bless you for all that. So yeah. Is there any other announcements that we need to make locally for this coming week? If not, let's stand and be dismissed. And Brother Lee, would you pronounce the benediction?
Father in heaven, we come to you at the close of this service. We want to thank you for salvation through Jesus Christ. We want to thank you, Lord, for Christian brothers and sisters that have helped us along on the road of faith. That we would learn to trust in you. Now, Lord, I pray that you would be with our whole spirit, soul, body until you would come or call. Amen. Sing the